Hello, 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 and welcome to episode 34 of Radio Free Filler. Well, here we are, stuck in the middle of January. Christmas is over, New Year's Day is old news, and all the holiday bubbly has gone flat. During our last show, we even accidentally repeated a couple of songs from an earlier show by mistake. It's really a nothing time of year. So, in keeping with that theme, we now present a special performance of something we call It's Not Much of a Life. Well, to make a long story short, our friend George is in trouble and he's feeling sorry for himself. How do I know? Well, believe it or not, I'm his guardian angel. Let's pick up the story from there. I don't know. I just don't know. Maybe it would have been better if I'd never been born. Oh, don't talk that way, George. Your life has touched so many others in so many ways. You just don't realize it. Well, what do you know about my life, little fella? What are you, my guardian angel? Actually, George, that's exactly what I am. Your guardian angel. I've been following you for your whole life. Oh, no offense, but you don't look like much of an angel. Well, you haven't had much of a life. Don't I know it? Say, if you're an angel, where are your wings? These are my wings. You call those skinny little bald things wings? Well, right now I'm molting. It happens to all us angels. It's just that nobody ever talks about that part. But getting back to your life... What life? My life has meant nothing. Like I said, maybe it would have been better if I'd never been born. Well, that's a thought. That gives me an idea. Wait a minute. Well? Yes, I can do that. Okay, George, you've just gotten your wish. You've never been born. I've never been born? You've got to be kidding me. What am I still doing here? Your spirit is still here, but now you're like me. No one else can see or hear you. That's nothing new. No one ever listens to me anyway. How can you prove that I'm a spirit? Oh, by taking you on a little trip through time. Well then, let's get going. Cue the harp music. Okay. Say, I know this place. That's my old home from when I was a child. Let's go inside. This must be Christmas morning. Look at all the presents under the tree. Right you are, George. But that can't be right. My folks could never afford all that stuff. But now they can. How come? Let's listen for a bit.
Say, Papa, that's quite a spread.
Yes, if I do say so myself. I'm so glad we decided to limit ourselves to just the one child. It makes life so much more affordable. Now, wait a minute. That's my kid brother. What's all this about having only one child? That's just it, George. they only had one child because you were never born. Gee, my mother looks happy. Yes, and she's kept her figure a lot better. Now, look here. Sorry, George, but your brother was an easier birth, that's all. But what about the time he nearly drowned in the pond when the ice broke? I wouldn't have been there to save him. He didn't go skating that day. Your parents were too protective of their only child to let him go out there alone. Well, how do you like that? I still can't get over all those toys. Let's skip ahead a bit. Another harp riff? You got it. Say, I know this place. This is where I first met. Is that Mary? In the flesh, George. Now that's someplace you'll never get to go. Now, cut that out. What are you, an X-rated angel? Sorry, I couldn't help myself. You see how she's just sitting there all alone? You weren't there to greet her. You were never born, remember? Say, who's that other guy? Wait a second. I think you'll recognize him. Well, hee-haw and howdy, little lady. What are you doing here all alone?
Waiting for you, handsome.
Hey, what's the big idea? He can't just walk off with her. She's my girl. Well, he's doing it, George. You've never been born. Wait a minute. Mary! Hey, Mary! Mary, don't you know me? She can't hear you, George. Well, what about all those loans I made to people? What about the way I saved the whole town from becoming Potterville? Well, George, since you weren't around to take over the family business, all that went to your brother Harry. Ah, and he ran the business right into the ground, right? No, he actually did very well. What about the stock market crash? Well, I hate to be the one to tell you, but Harry was actually a much sharper businessman than you, George. He worked out a deal with Mr. Potter and then proceeded to wipe the old man out. So when the Depression hit, it was Potter who lost everything. And the Bailey building and loan? Sold for a cool $50 million. And the movie house? Now a multiplex. And Mary and the kids? Mary takes her vacations in the Caribbean. As for the kids, well, you could say they do have a family resemblance. How come? I thought she married that hee-haw guy. No, Mary was too smart for that. She just did it to make Harry jealous. Do you mean to tell me? Oh, come on, George. You don't need me to tell you. Like I said, the kids do have a slight family resemblance. There are even a couple of extra ones. You see, Harry didn't like being an only child, and he did so well he could afford a large family. All right, I've seen enough. Take me back. Have it your way, George. Here comes the harp again. So here we are again, right back where we started. That's right, George. Say, wait a minute. What's that on the table? That? Oh, it's just a leftover donut. Somebody must have overbaked and left that donut there. Well, I want that donut. But you can't eat it, remember? You've never been born. Never mind what I said. Put everything back the way it was. You mean you want to be alive again? You bet. And hurry up. Okay, here comes the harp. Okay, now give me that donut. All right, George, it's all yours. But why the change of heart? I'll tell you why. All this might not mean anything, and I may not have had much of a life, but after all I've been through, I'll be hanged if I'm going to miss out on one lousy donut. Say, what's that bell? Does that mean an angel is getting his wings? No, that's just the cash register.
Well, I guess that just goes to show that even a small reward is enough reason to go on living. Let's all hope so, anyway. Speaking of small rewards, we have another couple of songs for you.
You got to get up early so you can get right back to bed. Now I'm not gonna swim the deepest ocean. All that I can show you is an easy way to drown. And I'm not gonna climb the highest mountain, but if you reach the top, I know a shortcut down. Get up. Get up. Get up. You got to get up early so you can get right back to bed. You take a look at me and tell me I got nothing. Well, maybe I got nothing, but I'm willing to share. You take another look and say I'm going nowhere. Well, hop on board, I'll gladly take you there. Get up. Get up. Get up. You got to get up early so you can get right back to bed. Off we go into a brand new day, and off we go into a brand new game. Look out below, the sun is coming down. Another day is ended and it all came out the same. Go, 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 go to bed. Go, 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 go to bed. Go, 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 go to bed. It's time to go to bed so you can get back up and go. Get up, go, 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 go to bed. Get up, go, 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 go to bed. Get up, go, 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 go to bed. Now wait a minute. Okay, now start again. Get up. Get up. Get up. You got to get up early so you can get right back to bed. I took a walk the other day and I was feeling fine. And as I turned a corner, I met a friend of mine. He looked at me and stopped and stared and blinked and shook his head. He gasped as if to catch his breath, and this is what he said: "You really ought to get that looked at, don't wait another day. You really ought to get that looked at, or it might get stuck that way." I kept on walking on my way and saw a traffic cop. I wasn't going to cross the street, but he signaled me to stop. He held the traffic motionless and quickly left his post. He spoke to me with a face as pale as if he'd seen a ghost. You really ought to get that looked at before it gets much worse. I've radioed an ambulance before you need a hearse. The ambulance came screaming up, they made me climb inside, and the next thing that I knew, I was going for a ride. They rushed me to the hospital and said forget the fee. The doctor saw me right away and then he said to me, you really ought to get that looked at by someone else, not me. I'm writing a referral to a specialist you should see. The specialist was just next door, and so they rushed me there. And when he took one look at me, he howled and tore his hair. He said, we'll have to operate right now, without a doubt. He jabbed a needle in my arm, and then the lights went out. I woke up in a hazy fog, but as my sight returned, I saw a nurse and a specialist, both looking quite concerned. The specialist was whispering, we gave him up for dead. And then he had me brace myself, and this is what he said. You really should have got that looked at, you got here much too late. We found some complications and we had to amputate. I asked them what had happened, but neither one would say. They exchanged some awkward glances and turned and walked away. I spent a week in rehab where they made an awful fuss, but the details of my problem they'd simply not discuss. And now the strangers that I meet are careful what they say. They look at me with sympathy before they break away. So listen to the people now and follow their advice. Do what they say and right away, don't make them tell you twice. You really ought to get that looked at and isolate the cause, or you just might end up losing it and not know what it was. I asked the doctor if I would be able to play the piano. He looked me in the eye and told me no.
And now, an even smaller reward. guess we'll move on to something important in our next show. In the meantime, thanks for listening to Radio Free Filler.